Welcome to Monday Markers with Charlie, our number sixth program, and we'll be talking about Pittsburgh's role in the Civil War. And this series is based on the Labor History Sites brochure that I did with Howard Scott of the United Steelworkers Union and was printed by the steelworkers. Information at the end of the program will tell you how to get the booklet, and you can help out the Battle of Homestead Foundation by doing that. The fact that my great-grandfather lost his hand at the Third Battle of Winchester and changed his name from Lee to Lincoln, and I've always had a deep interest in the Civil War, and I'm very proud of Pittsburgh's role in that war. We have dealt with two of the fiercest individual resistors to slavery to come out of Pittsburgh. One, Martin Delany, and the other, Jane Grey Swisshelm. Two truly great heroes that should be very much a part of the education of our young in Pittsburgh and should be remembered in public spaces, something that really needs to be done. This marker story, number 6, deals with the concerted activity, with political protests, with mass uprising, in particular the uprising of December 24, 25, 20, up to 27 to after Abraham Lincoln's election in November. South Carolina seceded December 20th. Orders were in preparation, put forward by John Floyd, who was the Secretary of War under James Buchanan, a Pennsylvanian, to move 124 large-scale cannon to the south from Pittsburgh, from the Allegheny Arsenal. It's important to remember that in 1860, the Democratic Party, which had dominated Pennsylvania for several decades, split, and between a radical wing firmly supporting slavery and secession if necessary, and a more moderate wing. This gave a Republican Party, which was only 4 years old. Its founding convention actually had been held in Pittsburgh in 1856. This new party was able then to win the election because of its resistance to the expansion of slavery, in particular, especially after the Fugitive Slave Law and the terrible U.S. Supreme Court decision in Dred Scott case. The people in the North, abolitionism, the sense of it, feeling for it was rising, and Pittsburgh was the center of that. The second reason was that the Republican Party did so well was that it was a strongly protectionist party. It very strongly believed in the necessity for high tariffs to protect American manufacturing from European competition. So the state of Pennsylvania was key, absolutely central to the nomination of Abraham Lincoln. It was the switch on the second ballot to Lincoln that really made his nomination inevitable, and the split in the South inevitable, and secession and the war. The new Republican Party won a crushing electoral victory in Pennsylvania, and especially a huge majority in Allegheny County. And again, in 1864, Allegheny County gave the highest percentage to Lincoln of any county in the country. The Allegheny Arsenal was an incredibly important place for putting together ammunition and arms for the the Union Army. And particularly today, we'll talk about the arsenal next week, but today I want to talk about the Fort Pitt Foundry, It was alongside the Allegheny River, also near the arsenal. It was the producer of arguably, but certainly some of the most powerful cannon made in the entire world at the time. During the Civil War, more than 2,200 large cannon were produced there. Most of them had 8 inches to 15-inch bore size, but 6 Rodman guns, famous guns with 20-inch bore, could throw a 1,000-pound projectile 5 miles. Thomas Rodman, who had worked at the Allegheny Arsenal for 20 years, developed numerous technical improvements that made this kind of firepower and throw power possible. In December, President James Buchanan's Secretary of War, John Floyd, once governor of Virginia, and according to Ulysses Grant, not only did he order the movement of the cannon, but he scattered the army. Quote, this is a quote from Grant's autobiography. He scattered the army so that much of it could be captured when hostilities should commence, and he distributed the cannon and small arms from northern arsenals throughout the South, so to be on hand when treason wanted them. However, Floyd, after his order to move the 124 large bore guns out of Pittsburgh to the south, was met in Pittsburgh by vigorous resistance. The secession of South Carolina, December 20th, certainly was very much in people's mind. And as the order went out on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and the succeeding days, there was attempts to move these huge guns down on Grant Street, and they up to 10,000 people, Pittsburghers, gathered in the streets and blocked the cannon to move to the south. I have contended for years that this was the first act of the North in the American Civil War. It was not done by politicians, was not done by generals, not done by the army, but it was done by the people of Pittsburgh, who saw the danger in removing these guns to their own lives and to the survival of the Union, and stepped forward and peaceably blocked these cannons with popular outcry and demonstrations. Meetings were held, petitions were made, and eventually President Buchanan rescinded the order, and the guns stayed in the North. 2 months later, less than 2 months later, February 14th, Abraham Lincoln came to Pittsburgh on his way to take up the incredible burden that was looming of the presidency during a civil war. And Lincoln was still hoping that somehow that they could convince the South not to secede and that they could block the extension of slavery, but that at this point, when he came to Pittsburgh, he did not speak about the political situation, which was on everybody's mind, but he spoke about protection of American industry. There was huge crowds. 10,000 people stood in pouring downpour, waiting for hours because the train had been derailed further up the line between Ohio and Pittsburgh and came in late, but the crowd stayed and marched with him, with Lincoln, over the bridge and came to the Monongahela House. Now, the Monongahela House was Pittsburgh's finest hotel, the best hotel between New York and Chicago, and it had a very large African-American waiters and cleaning peoples and barbers who worked at the Monongahela House, including at some point Jean Vachon, one of the great leaders of the black community in Pittsburgh and a fierce anti-slavery person. And there had been several slave snatchings, either in the hotel, outside the hotel, in ways that the wait staff would tell particularly the females who were brought along to wait on or be part of the entourage of slaveholders coming up north selling cotton bales, that how to escape, and numbers of them did escape from the Monongahela House. So it was a place with a particular significance. And Lincoln spoke from the balcony of the Monongahela House twice, and once in the evening and once the next morning when crowds gathered and filled Smithfield Street, and again. And he said, labor being the true standard of value, a tariff should be arranged to foster and protect the interests of all sections of our nation. The iron of Pennsylvania, the corn of Indiana, the reapers of Chicago. An enthusiastic crowd was shouting, "That's the doctrine!" The doctrine to protect the livelihood and work of the American people. So in this time, when we better understand the meaning of essential labor, we need to seriously engage in a major rebuilding of our infrastructure, a rebuilding of our power generation in a green and sustainable way, and a rebuilding of our manufacturing. And we also need a political regeneration that we have seen the embryo of with black and white youth in the streets, demanding an end to racism and discrimination that is rooted in the slave system that was overthrown at the cost of over 600,000 lives. We cannot forget, and that system is not completely eradicated, and it must be.